The courtroom buzzed like a storm about to break. Camera flashes ignited the polished wood panels, reflecting in the wide eyes of every spectator and journalist packed into the gallery. Whispers ricocheted off the high ceilings, a mixture of anticipation, skepticism, and unspoken tension. This was no ordinary hearing. This was the stage where reputations would collide, where arrogance would meet unshakable resolve. Richard Posner leaned forward, a smirk curling across his face, his voice dripping with condescension. "Fake lawyer," he said, as if the words themselves were enough to shatter confidence. The gallery flinched, journalists paused mid-typing, and for a brief heartbeat, it seemed the courtroom had been frozen in disbelief. The remark was sharp, calculated, designed to humiliate, to unnerve, to dominate. It was Posner at his most imposing, at his most certain of victory. But across the aisle, Jasmine Crockett remained a study in composure. Her gaze met his with a calm precision, unwavering and steady, radiating a quiet power that demanded attention. There was no tremor in her hands, no flicker of doubt in her eyes. Where Posner tried to wield mockery as a weapon, she embodied dignity as her armor. Every inch of her posture whispered confidence born from preparation, skill, and a lifetime of challenges overcome. She didn't flinch, she didn't respond immediately. She let the silence stretch, letting the weight of her presence counterbalance the venom of his words. The audience leaned in, sensing the unspoken battle. The room seemed to pulse with electricity as though the walls themselves held their breath. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras rolled without pause, and murmurs of shock and curiosity threaded through the air. This was more than a courtroom exchange. It was a clash of legacies, of intellect versus arrogance, of truth confronting ridicule. And then, as Posner's smirk faltered for the briefest instant, a subtle shift occurred, a tension that hinted something monumental was about to unfold. The murmurs grew into expectant silence, the flashes of cameras now capturing history in motion. The crowd could feel it. This was no ordinary retort coming. Jasmine Crockett was about to change the narrative entirely. But what happened next left everyone in disbelief. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension, far beyond the glare of cameras or the whispering of journalists. This moment was bigger than a single insult. It was a test of credibility, skill, and the weight of every argument Jasmine Crockett had ever prepared. Every eye in the room seemed to focus solely on her, as if the very idea of truth itself was hanging in the balance. Posner's mocking words had been a spark, but the fire of what was to come would ignite a debate that would reverberate far beyond these walls. Outside the courtroom, whispers had already reached the streets. Social media buzzed with clips of the fake lawyer remark, fueling outrage, disbelief, and curiosity. Viewers across the nation were watching, some skeptical, some supportive, all waiting to see whether Crockett would crumble under the weight of public scrutiny or rise to redefine the narrative. Every post, every trending hashtag, every debate clip now carried stakes that extended beyond reputation. They carried the story of resilience and dignity, of what it means to stand unshaken in the face of blatant arrogance. Within the courtroom, Posner's presence dominated the room. His reputation as a legal titan and his years of experience added an intimidating weight. Every word he spoke carried authority. Every gesture amplified the image of someone untouchable. Yet, it was precisely this veneer of invincibility that raised the stakes. The audience understood. This was not merely a clash of lawyers, but a confrontation between entrenched power and earned expertise, between ego and principle, between the comfort of cynicism and the challenge of true justice. Jasmine Crockett, however, did not hesitate. She understood that this confrontation was not just about winning the argument. It was about representation. For immigrants, for women, for those whose voices were often dismissed or ridiculed, she was a beacon of capability and integrity. Her calm demeanor was a declaration. Skill and truth outweigh mockery and intimidation. Each measured response, each pause, Each deliberate look at the jury and the gallery reinforced the message that she was prepared not just to respond, but to dominate with evidence and intellect. As the courtroom waited, the tension reached a crescendo. The whispers of spectators were now replaced by a charged silence, a collective anticipation that something monumental was about to unfold. Every question, every objection, every subtle gesture could tilt the balance. The audience could sense it. The confrontation wasn't just legal, it was symbolic. It was a moment where arrogance would be tested against preparation, ridicule against integrity, and superficial mockery against the power of earned mastery. And with every passing second, the realization settled in for everyone present. What happened next would not just decide this case. It would define the narrative, shift perceptions, and leave a mark that could not be undone. What happened next would change everything. Richard Posner was no ordinary opponent. To the untrained eye, he was a towering figure of intellect, a legal luminary whose opinions and judgments had shaped decades of jurisprudence. His resume gleamed with accolades, citations, and the kind of gravitas that made newcomers tremble before even entering a courtroom. But beneath the polished veneer of authority lay a pattern that few dared to question, a sharp-edged arrogance that often overshadowed fairness, a dismissive attitude toward those he deemed unworthy of serious consideration. From early in his career, Posner had been celebrated for brilliance, but equally notorious for his condescension. Colleagues whispered about his tendency to belittle younger lawyers, to underestimate challengers who didn't fit the mold of the elite, to dismiss women and minorities whose talent threatened his perception of hierarchy. It was a strategy of dominance, assert authority, provoke self-doubt, and secure the upper hand before the first argument had even been made. For Posner, confidence and reputation were weapons, and he wielded them with precision. The courtroom was his stage, and he knew how to command it. Every smirk, every carefully timed pause, every dismissive glance was calculated to unnerve opponents and impress the audience. To him, rhetoric often mattered more than evidence, performance more than principle. And this approach had worked countless times before, leaving challengers flustered, audiences impressed, and victories secured with minimal effort. His arrogance was not incidental. It was the lens through which he viewed the world, the framework that shaped his interactions, and the invisible edge he believed gave him invincibility. Yet, this very arrogance carried a blind spot. In his history of triumphs, he had rarely faced someone who refused to be intimidated, someone who turned patience into strategy, composure into power. Posner's past victories, though celebrated, were often won against opponents who lacked the resolve to withstand both his intellect and his scorn. It was a pattern: provoke, mock, dominate, and leave no room for recovery. And for decades, it had worked. That pattern had created an aura of inevitability around him, a sense that he could control the narrative before the first word of argument was spoken. But Jasmine Crockett represented something different. In Posner's mind, she was another opponent to dismiss, another young lawyer to belittle, another chance to perform superiority. He assumed her quiet composure was uncertainty, her calm gaze a mask for nervousness. He underestimated her experience, her preparation, and above all, her determination. The irony was stark. The very traits that he interpreted as weakness, the patience, the poise, the steady focus, were exactly what made her a formidable adversary. The courtroom had seen many battles, but rarely had it been the stage for a collision between such contrasting forces. Posner's practiced arrogance versus Crockett's unshakable integrity. Every whisper of his reputation, every note of his past triumphs, every calculated insult had built an expectation, an audience primed to witness his dominance. Yet, beneath that expectation simmered a tension he could not anticipate. The arrival of someone who would not bow, who would turn mockery into opportunity, and whose very presence challenged the patterns that had made him untouchable. And so, as Posner leaned forward, confident in his legacy, a subtle unease began to creep beneath his surface. The room was silent, yet the undercurrent was unmistakable. The arrogance that had carried him so far was about to meet a force that would test it in ways history had rarely recorded. The audience held its breath, sensing the impending collision, knowing, without fully understanding, that this confrontation would not end as Posner expected. The stage was set, the players defined, and the battle lines drawn. What unfolded next would shatter expectations, defy assumptions, and leave the courtroom and the nation watching in stunned disbelief. But the question lingered in every mind present. Could arrogance survive against unwavering preparation and indomitable resolve? Jasmine Crockett's journey was never handed to her. From a young age, she faced skepticism and low expectations, a world quick to judge her potential based on background or appearance. Each challenge she encountered became fuel for determination, each moment of doubt a chance to prove resilience. She learned early that true strength is forged through preparation, perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to integrity. Her education was more than grades and accolades. It was a rigorous training ground. Long nights studying case law, weekends spent honing arguments, and countless hours in moot court competitions sharpened both her mind and her instincts. Every essay, every analysis, every legal debate was a rehearsal for moments like this courtroom confrontation. She understood that skill and preparation were her armor against ridicule and condescension, and she wielded them with quiet confidence. Beyond academics, Jasmine carried the weight of representation. She understood the significance of her victories not just for herself, but for those whose voices were often dismissed: immigrants, women, and marginalized communities. Her calm demeanor and unwavering gaze were more than composure. They were statements of resilience, reflections of years spent transforming doubt into determination and challenges into opportunity. Professionally, she had earned a reputation for skill and precision, repeatedly proving that intellect and preparation could outmatch intimidation. Opponents often underestimated her, assuming youth, gender, or background would be liabilities. Time and again, she proved them wrong. Each courtroom victory strengthened her legacy, demonstrating that true authority stems from mastery and moral clarity, not reputation or entitlement. By the time she faced Richard Posner, Jasmine was ready. She had been forged by years of challenge and honed by experience. She knew this confrontation would demand more than legal skill. It would test patience, poise, and strategic focus. Her presence in the courtroom radiated confidence, every movement deliberate, every glance measured. She was prepared not only to meet arrogance with skill, but to transform mockery into opportunity. And as the room fell into silence, every eye trained on her, it became clear Jasmine Crockett was more than ready to confront Richard Posner. What was about to unfold would not only test her preparation, but also redefine expectations, proving that resilience, skill, and integrity could silence even the most arrogant opposition. The real test, the collision of mockery and mastery, was only just beginning. The tension in the courtroom had reached a near palpable intensity. Every eye was fixed on Jasmine Crockett and Richard Posner, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. What began as a sharp insult had quickly evolved into a high-stakes intellectual duel, one where every word, every pause, every carefully measured phrase carried weight far beyond the room itself. This was no longer a matter of legal points. It was a confrontation between ego and integrity, arrogance and preparation, spectacle and substance. Posner leaned forward, his expression tight, with a mixture of confidence and irritation. Each question he posed was laced with insinuation, each objection a calculated attempt to unsettle Jasmine. He tried to dominate the rhythm of the courtroom, speaking over her at moments, throwing in quips designed to elicit laughter from the gallery and to puncture her composure. The intent was clear: intimidate, belittle, and assert authority. But Jasmine remained unshaken. Every interruption was met with measured silence, her poise unbroken, her gaze steady. Her calmness was a quiet rebuke, a demonstration that preparation and clarity were stronger than mockery. As the debate escalated, Posner intensified his tactics. He highlighted supposed inconsistencies in her legal reasoning, questioned her experience, and emphasized his own legacy. "Do you really think your victories compare to decades of precedent?" he asked, a thinly veiled challenge meant to rattle her confidence. Yet Jasmine's responses were deliberate, precise, and unwavering. She acknowledged the historical context, validated his achievements without deference, and seamlessly integrated her own legal record as proof of competence and mastery. Each point she made landed like a well-aimed arrow, exposing gaps in his assumptions while maintaining the dignity of her position. The gallery reacted in subtle but telling ways. A whisper of admiration here, a suppressed gasp there. Journalists leaned closer, pens poised, cameras capturing every expression. The courtroom was no longer just a venue. It was a stage, the tension of every exchange magnified by the knowledge that the world was watching. Social media feeds outside were already alight with commentary. Clips of Posner's condescension, her calm rebuttals, debates over the power dynamic unfolding live. Each reaction added to the stakes, reinforcing that this confrontation was about more than a single courtroom. It was a narrative being written in real time. And then came the turning point within the escalation. Posner, growing frustrated, attempted a more aggressive tactic, a sharp, dismissive remark aimed at undermining her credibility entirely. But Jasmine, anticipating the move, responded not with anger, but with methodical precision, citing evidence, precedent, and clear legal reasoning that left no room for dismissal. The shift was subtle but undeniable. The courtroom atmosphere changed. The power balance, carefully maintained by Posner's arrogance, began to tilt. By the end of this heated exchange, it was clear that the confrontation had transformed. What had begun as a challenge of skill had become a test of composure, resilience, and intellectual fortitude. Posner's attempts to dominate and intimidate were failing, and Jasmine's calm, calculated responses were asserting authority not through volume, but through undeniable mastery. And just as the audience started to grasp the magnitude of the clash, a silence fell over the courtroom, a quiet anticipation, the sense that the next move could shatter expectations entirely. What Jasmine would do next would not merely answer the challenge. It would redefine it, leaving Posner, the courtroom, and everyone watching in stunned disbelief. The courtroom held its breath. Every eye followed Jasmine Crockett as she rose from her seat, calm, yet commanding, her expression unflinching. Posner, who had spent years asserting dominance with smirks and condescension, now faced a different reality. This was no longer a debate he could control with reputation alone. Every ounce of preparation, every late night studying, every courtroom victory in her past had built to this moment, and she was ready to strike with precision. She began with measured clarity, outlining her argument with authority that demanded attention. There was no anger, no need for theatrics. Her words were evidence, logic, and undeniable fact woven together with effortless skill. Each point addressed the gaps Posner had tried to exploit. Each legal precedent she cited countered the condescension he had so casually thrown at her. The calmness in her voice contrasted sharply with Posner's mounting agitation, a subtle but effective display of control. The gallery leaned in. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras capturing every expression. Spectators exchanged glances as they realized that what they were witnessing was more than a legal argument. It was a masterclass in composure and intellect. Social media feeds outside erupted in real time. Clips of her measured rebuttals were already trending, hashtags praising her precision and poise multiplying with each passing moment. The murmurs of awe in the courtroom reflected what millions online were feeling. Someone had just challenged the norms of arrogance, and the results were devastatingly clear. Posner attempted to interject, a sharp remark intended to regain control, but Jasmine anticipated it. She paused just long enough for the silence to weigh on him, then delivered her next point with surgical accuracy. Each citation, each example, each logical step left him visibly unsettled. His smirk faltered, replaced by the first cracks in the armor of his composure. The arrogance that had carried him through decades of courtrooms began to crumble under the weight of her preparation and calm authority. The crescendo of her argument came not in volume, but in its undeniable clarity. Jasmine tied together her legal victories, her ethical reasoning, and her unwavering focus into a single, compelling narrative. The courtroom seemed to shrink around them. Every spectator felt the shift, the realization that mockery could not withstand intellect and integrity. Posner's attempts to assert dominance fell flat, his gestures becoming sharper but less effective, a stark contrast to her serene confidence. And then came the moment the gallery would remember forever. With one final, meticulously articulated point, Jasmine dismantled his previous arguments entirely, leaving him speechless. The pause that followed was deafening. Cameras clicked rapidly, journalists exchanged stunned looks, and the murmurs of the crowd transformed into a ripple of audible admiration. It was a mic drop moment, not a bravado, but of undeniable mastery. In that silence, it became clear arrogance had met its match. Preparation, skill, and integrity had triumphed. Posner, once untouchable in his courtly dominance, now sat confronted not just by an opponent, but by a force of intellect and resilience he had underestimated. And the world, watching closely, understood that what had just occurred would echo far beyond this single courtroom. The room still held its breath, the air charged with anticipation. What happened next, the aftermath, the ripples across the legal world and beyond, would leave everyone stunned and force a reckoning that no one could ignore. The courtroom emptied slowly, but the impact of Jasmine Crockett's triumph did not fade. Outside, reporters scrambled to capture the moment, their pens flying across notebooks, cameras flashing incessantly, and live streams already broadcasting clips of the decisive rebuttal that had left Richard Posner speechless. Social media exploded in real time. Hashtags praising her skill, integrity, and composure trended within minutes. Memes circulated mocking Posner's failed attempts at dominance, while clips of Jasmine's calm, methodical dismantling of his arguments were shared tens of thousands of times within hours. The narrative was clear. This was more than a courtroom victory. Jasmine Crockett had not only defended her legal record, she had redefined what it meant to face arrogance and intimidation with preparation and dignity. Commentators on national news channels dissected her performance, praising the clarity and strength of her argumentation. Panel discussions debated the significance of this clash, highlighting how Crockett's poise contrasted with Posner's faltering confidence. The courtroom drama had become a cultural moment, a lesson in resilience, intelligence, and integrity for viewers across the country. Influencers and public figures weighed in almost immediately. Legal analysts tweeted their astonishment, emphasizing how rare it was to witness someone handle mockery with such composed mastery. Progressive voices highlighted her victory as a symbolic triumph, framing it as a moment of representation for immigrants, women, and marginalized communities. Messages flooded in from viewers inspired by her courage and skill, expressing admiration for her ability to remain unshaken under pressure and to turn ridicule into opportunity. Meanwhile, within the courtroom, the atmosphere remained electric. Lawyers who had observed the exchange whispered to colleagues, impressed by her strategic dismantling of Posner's arguments. Even the jury, who had been skeptical initially, now appeared visibly engaged, leaning forward as if absorbing the full weight of her mastery. Posner himself sat quietly, his usual smug demeanor replaced by an uncharacteristic stillness. It was clear that the power dynamics had shifted. The arrogance that had dominated the room just hours earlier now seemed diminished in comparison to Crockett's disciplined, measured authority. The ripple effects extended far beyond the legal world. Universities, law schools, and advocacy organizations highlighted her performance as an example of professional excellence and resilience. Podcasts dissected her technique, emphasizing how preparation and composure could neutralize even the most intimidating opponents. The story of her courtroom victory inspired conversations about leadership, gender equity, and the role of integrity in positions of influence. For many, Jasmine Crockett became not just a legal hero, but a symbol of how determination, skill, and courage could challenge entrenched power structures. As the day wore on, opinion pieces and editorials began to appear, framing the confrontation as a moment of reckoning. Headlines celebrated her calm authority, her meticulous preparation, and her ability to silence mockery with intellect rather than aggression. Posner's failed attempts at dominance became the cautionary tale of arrogance, meeting an opponent who refused to be intimidated. Public discourse shifted almost overnight, with Crockett's performance sparking broader discussions about mentorship, representation, and the value of perseverance. And yet, despite the acclaim and viral attention, Jasmine remained composed. She did not seek praise or attention for its own sake. Her victory was a demonstration of principle, proof that diligence, preparation, and moral courage could prevail over mockery and intimidation. The courtroom had witnessed a historic confrontation, and the world outside had seen the ripple effects: admiration, debate, and inspiration spreading like wildfire. But even as the applause and social media reactions surged, a subtle tension lingered in the air. Everyone understood that the story was far from over, that the implications of this confrontation would continue to unfold, shaping perceptions, influencing decisions, and setting the stage for what came next. In the quiet that followed the courtroom storm, a profound lesson lingered in the air. Jasmine Crockett's victory was more than a legal triumph. It was a testament to the enduring power of preparation, integrity, and calm resilience. While Richard Posner had relied on reputation, arrogance, and the intimidation of his presence, Jasmine had demonstrated that true authority is earned, not inherited, and that respect is commanded through skill, dignity, and unwavering commitment to truth. Her performance reframed the entire confrontation. What could have been remembered as a clash between established power and a younger challenger became instead a narrative of perseverance prevailing over condescension. It was a reminder that intellect, preparation, and moral clarity can dismantle even the most formidable egos. Every observer, from the jury to the journalists, from online viewers to seasoned legal analysts, saw that courage paired with competence carries weight far beyond any insult. The symbolic power of her victory resonated deeply. For immigrants, women, and anyone whose potential is too often underestimated, Jasmine Crockett became a living proof that barriers can be broken. Her triumph in the courtroom illustrated that identity, resilience, and skill are not mutually exclusive. They can coexist to challenge entrenched hierarchies and redefine expectations. It was a reminder that dignity is not dependent on others' approval, but on one's own preparation, poise, and principles. Beyond the courtroom, the story became a moral compass for audiences everywhere. It sparked conversations about the importance of standing firm in the face of ridicule, using intellect over aggression, and transforming challenges into opportunities for growth and influence. Jasmine's calm, unwavering approach served as a model of how to confront arrogance without compromising integrity, how to respond to mockery without stooping to it, and how to turn tension into triumph. Ultimately, the confrontation was not just about winning a case. It was about sending a message that skill, preparation, and ethical courage will always outweigh arrogance, bluster, and entitlement. Her example inspired those watching to embrace their own potential, to trust in their preparation, and to face intimidating circumstances with confidence and clarity. It was a reminder that true leadership is defined not by ego, but by the ability to act with precision, principle, and purpose. And as the courtroom emptied and the cameras ceased their flashing, the lesson remained. Arrogance may make a scene, but resilience and mastery leave a legacy. Jasmine Crockett had not just won a debate. She had rewritten the rules of engagement, proving that integrity, intelligence, and courage could silence mockery and redefine what it means to command respect. The ripple of her victory would continue to be felt, shaping expectations and inspiring action far beyond the walls of that courtroom. As the courtroom lights dimmed and the echoes of applause faded, the story of Jasmine Crockett's triumph lingered in the minds of all who witnessed it. This was more than a legal victory. It was a moment that crystallized the power of preparation, resilience, and integrity. Audiences had seen arrogance confronted not with aggression, but with calm mastery, and the lesson was clear. True authority is earned through skill, dedication, and unwavering principle. For viewers, the significance extended beyond the courtroom. Jasmine's performance became a symbol for anyone facing doubt, condescension, or systemic bias. Her victory inspired confidence, reinforcing that preparation and courage could overcome intimidation, and that perseverance in the face of adversity can turn obstacles into opportunities. It was a demonstration of how skill, poise, and ethical conviction can redefine expectations and command lasting respect. Now, it's your turn to be part of the story. Share this message with others who need inspiration. Engage in conversations about courage and integrity, and remember that every challenge you face is a chance to rise above. Subscribe for more stories where heroes confront arrogance, where preparation and resilience redefine the narrative, and where the power of skill and integrity shines brighter than the loudest mockery. The legacy of Jasmine Crockett's courtroom moment is still unfolding, but its impact is undeniable. Carry it forward. Learn from it. Let it remind you that no matter the obstacle, no matter the opponent, perseverance, preparation, and principle will always leave a mark. And as we close this chapter, remember, arrogance may make noise, but mastery and integrity echo far longer, and the next moment of triumph could be yours.